Longtime member of this church, Kim Bouchard, once told me, "I'm an Orthodox Unitarian Universalist. I don't go to church in the summer." Now, I don't understand the full history of it, but for many years, this congregation and many other UU congregations across our country didn't have services in the summer. In fact, our very own, the Reverend David Reisbard, in nearly 50 years of full-time ministry, said he never preached in July or August. Back in the day, he told me, all the ministers just went to Maine for the summer. The reality is some of us travel, take vacations, and enjoy the mostly wonderful weather of the past 2 months. Now, we do have worship services over the summer. Of course, they have a lower attendance, and other programming and meetings at the church here come kind of to a halt during those months. But everyone is back now. Yeah. And with the rhythms of the 4 universities and the cadences of our school-age children and youth, here now is the beginning of our church here. Some may have called it homecoming, others ingathering. We are also beginning again in other ways. This is really the first in-person ingathering without COVID restrictions in 3 years. So today is a very special celebration, a welcome back not only from summer, but from 2.5 years of being hesitant. We are gathered here to be whole again. This is a time to reconnect, to get saturated and soaked in our beloved community, to get our spiritual thirst quenched. It is also a time to recognize the pandemic, the fear, the grief, the trauma, the shock, the shattering, and the sometimes lack of a functioning brain. I don't know about you, but early on in the pandemic, spring of 2020, I feared not only for my life and my family's life, but for all of yours. In fact, church council was coming up with an emergency plan that if I got COVID, what would happen? And die, what would happen? I thought briefly that this might be the end of civilization as we know it. The pandemic, for sure, has been a community-wide crisis. Now, just months ago, at the end of June, I tested positive for COVID after I came back from General Assembly in Portland, Oregon. I had an individual crisis with COVID. Initially, symptoms were mild, and I thought, hey, I'm vaccinated, I'm boosted, I'm 43 years old. It won't be a big deal at all. Well, the reality was a bit different. I had all the flu-like aches, fever, cough. I could not smell anything. I threw up. I couldn't quite do anything, and I even had 2 bouts of vertigo. At one point, I started to despair. Betsy, can you look after that? Thanks. It is good to hear, oh, wonderful. Once a teacher and a mom, always a teacher and a mom, right? So where was I? Okay, I had COVID, and I was starting to despair. What if this kept on getting worse? What if I didn't heal up? What if this turned into long COVID? And I realized I had no control. This is the moment where crisis can become contemplation. When things break, we become open. In an individual crisis, we need the stillness of spirit, the song of life, to relinquish control and actively search for grounding in the depths of our inner spaces. Theologian Barbara Holmes points out a collective crisis response should be different from an individual crisis, however. Our faith community has been collectively wounded. And it's not just from the 204 COVID-related deaths in St. Lawrence County. It is that our basic structures of what we thought were always going to be there, including the inner peace of this sanctuary, sometimes ends. We may fall through the torn social safety nets and feel the fracture of a failed healthcare system, but we can collectively fall into a broken stillness. A collective crisis needs a collective response. We need more than an individual response, a ritual to join into and to wash us of our collective trauma. We need to gather again as a whole community. Words or prayers or cries may not help change the situation. And sometimes all that we can do is breathe, survive, and thrive together. But as Holmes writes, we can grasp one another spiritually, gather our collective courage, and let go. A new story, a new beginning is being written by the events that we can't control. So we are cracking open, shattering our old expectations and presumptions of how the world should look and work. We are in the midst of a raw new beginning. And when we let go of what we think we are, we become what we might be. My hope is that in this simple ceremony of water, we can collectively let go and enter into the great source of all new beginnings. Feel the stillness after the primal scream and be the unifying community our country and community so desperately needs.